Hello, how are you? This week my husband and I received a very exciting parcel in the post, and it was a book, and I read that book and I thought, you know what, I'm going to review that book. Might be a little weird, something a bit different on my channel this week, but this is the amazing book Is Not on Fire, The World of Dan and Phil by Dan and Phil. As I'm sure you know, Dan and Phil are YouTubers. This is their book. It was released this week, published by Ebury Press, and it's about 225 pages long. First and most importantly, this is incredibly important, so this is a hardback book, as you can probably tell. These pages, I can't even describe how good they smell. If you're into like expensive paper, inky, shiny, glossy smells, they just smell so good. I was reading this in the train, just reading it like this close. Anyway, moving on, a little backstory about me and Dan and Phil. Phil was the first YouTuber I ever subscribed to on recommendation from a school friend in 2009. Oh, so long ago. I was 16, I suppose. And yeah, I watched his videos, I really enjoyed them, and then Dan sort of came into his life and therefore came into my subscription feed as well. And I've always enjoyed their videos, but something sort of happened as I became an adult. They became these hugely successful, popular internet people with lots and lots and lots of subscribers, and they developed a fan base which became known by the people in the fan base as the fandom. They identify as fans, PHAN, and everything got kind of big and exciting. And so I went into this book not as a PH fan, but as someone who just enjoys their videos but maybe feels a bit older than that. So I went into this with quite a large degree of trepidation. I think my biggest worry was that I'd feel like I was reading something that was aimed at people much younger than me. Like, I'm okay at reading books for teenagers and young adults. Like, reading a book for 12-13-year-olds just kind of makes me back away slowly. And I can tell you that that was not the case. This book definitely isn't written for me, like people my age. It wasn't written for me. Dedication to Candice, no one else. No, it's not written for adults, but it's definitely not for really young teenagers. It has the word bitch in it. Bitch. So let me kind of talk to you about kind of the style of this and what it actually is. So it's kind of sort of the story of Dan and Phil and how they got where they are, along with some kind of fun, random, silly things and a sort of more in-depth explanation of things that may have already been covered in videos or things that you might have seen on Twitter. So both of them are writing it, and on pages where they're collaborating in the writing, they have like a little blue P and a little red D, and then they write and they're sort of constantly in conversation with each other, and it's really nice, and they manage to maintain that tone, that kind of friendliness and sarcasm that they have when they talk to each other in videos, and that translates really, really well into this book. It's really beautifully put together. It's like a scrapbook, so it has old photos and lots of cool fonts and lots of doodles, and so it goes through and Phil looks at his old diaries, and they both kind of share embarrassing things from their childhood / early teenagehood. My favourite parts, Phil has a section in which he posts chat logs. MSN was an instant messaging service that I used to use, and I feel like everyone who used that was very young at the time. Even if they weren't, it feels like a long time ago, and we were all mentally in a very different place. And conversations you had there were very embarrassing, mainly because we all spoke in text talk if nothing else, and so Phil like copy and pastes some of these conversations he had with like friends or love interests on MSN. They're just so very, very funny. And there's another section quite near the end which is similar in its humour, and it's just like screenshots of texts, iMessages between Dan and Phil themselves, and I think it's those things that are really honest and spontaneous and funny. Those things were never written with a book in mind, with being published. They're just real people having conversations. So it moves on through time. They talk about high school stories, and then Phil talks about how he got into YouTube, his first YouTube video. Dan does the same. They talk about their first collaboration, how they met. Then they go on to talk about their university experiences. They talk about moving in together, and there's really cool little like plans, little hand-drawn plans of their apartment and all the different parts of that apartment. And then there's just like silly things like which chair in Dan and Phil's dining room are you? I was the purple one, if you were wondering. Ooh, another part I loved, just after they described their trip to Japan, there's a fanga of Dan and Phil manga volume 1, and it's just really, really beautifully drawn, and I thought that was really cool and creative. There were a couple of moments where I felt like old and distant and far away from all of this. There's like little doodles of the evolution of Dan and Phil's hair, and I was like, oh god, I'm too old for this, but that's okay, that's fine. Something else I really liked about this is that Dan and Phil never refer to their viewers as fans, not once in this whole entire book, even when they're talking about why they get asked to do things like have a Radio 1 show or present this, that and the other, and it's not because they have lots of fans. They never use that word, they use the word viewers or subscribers or whatever, and that's nice, that sits well with me. And there's also a part towards the end where they both write a fan fiction. Dan's has quite a lot of words in it actually, Phil's is much shorter, but they each write a fan fiction, and it's definitely not making fun of people who write fan fictions about them or about anyone on the internet or celebrities or anything. It's just sort of knowing internet culture really well. They know what it is, and instead of ignoring it or making fun of it, they just join in, they just give it a go, and I think that's really nice. I like their attitude towards their viewers is what I'm trying to say. I think it's just really visually great, really well designed. The design is credited to a man called Dave Brown, so good job him. I read this in about 2 hours maybe, but I definitely wouldn't recommend reading this in one sitting. It's sort of more a coffee table book. I realise that people who'll be buying this book probably don't own coffee tables, because it's $16.99, or at least that's what it says on my copy, and that's expensive. I mean, for a hardback book it's not that expensive, but it is for something that you're just going to read once, so definitely kind of either read it slowly or revisit it frequently and enjoy nice things that you haven't noticed in it before. It has lots of really high quality photos that you won't have seen before, also like photo shoot photos. So I think that's all I want to say. I really like this. I think it captures the tone and all the goodness and all the things that people like from Dan and Phil's singular videos, all those good things have found their way into this book. It's funny and it's light-hearted, and that is the point if you ask me. I will put a link to this beautifully scented, heavy book in the description if you want to know more, and I think that's all I've got to say. If you have any questions, I guess, leave those in the comments, and I'll see you very soon. Keep reading.